Did you ever wonder why, when people are talking about, let's say, politics or values or morality or whatever, that sometimes it feels like they're in completely different realities? Spiral dynamics is a scientific model that may help you to understand that. Hello and welcome to this video about spiral dynamics. It's a model about the development of consciousness and values, and I think you can say overall a bit like the evolution of human beings. It's a very nice model that helped me to understand a lot. Like once you see that kind of every human being goes through different stages of his development, and it's not just you grow up and then that's it, right? So we're talking about really stuff like holding complexity, different moral values, how you see other people, etc. And it's a really nice model if you want to understand other people better. Maybe you want to understand yourself even better. And this is what I want to explain here. But before I do that, I definitely want to start with a small disclaimer, because there is quite a large group of people who may feel offended just by the mere idea that someone could be further developed than someone else. And I want to make absolutely clear here that there's a very important distinction between being more mature and more developed in some area, whatever that is. It could be like intelligence or holding complexity or just overall a better understanding of anything, and the value as a human being. Because this model does not say if you're higher evolved on this ladder that you're somehow better than someone else. That's not the message of this model. It's really kind of just about the development of a person in terms of, like core values, and you can call it consciousness. I think it's a good way of putting it. And if someone is on a higher stage of his development, that does not mean that he or she is better than someone else. The usual comparison I like to give is when you have a 3-year-old and you have a 30-year-old. Definitely, I think we all agree that the 30-year-old is more mature, more advanced, most likely more intelligent, etc. than the 3-year-old. But that doesn't mean that the 3-year-old is kind of worse or whatever. It's really important that you get this distinction, and for some reason a lot of people have trouble with this. And I was sure I wanted to start this video with this disclaimer, because otherwise you would maybe stop the video after like 1 minute or so. So yeah, I hope that's absolutely clear. And another thing is that you're not just on one level of this, so there may be you may kind of still be on the transition to the new stage. It's not like a exact thing, but once you're aware of this model, you can really kind of put people somehow into these categories, and it's really helpful if you want to, like, for example, coach them or whatever to understand where they're at and what's their mindset like. And there are some pointers that kind of instantly, like once you hear a certain pointers, then you will already know, oh, okay, that's kind of that's where he or she comes from, and I find that really helpful. Another thing is that the next or the higher stages always include the other ones. So it's not like, I don't know, once you transcended stage red, then all of a sudden whatever you learned until that point is kind of invalid. That's not how it is, but it's always additive and inclusive and integrative, or integrating, I don't know. So yeah, that's why sometimes it can also happen for short periods, or short periods, that you regress to slightly lower levels than before. That may happen under stress for individual beings, but also for maybe even for societies temporarily. Yeah, and the structure of the video is mostly that I will now continue with explaining the different stages and how they build on top of each other. And I suggest we start with the most fundamental, basic, and in a sense primitive thing. That is the stage beige. this stage, and with also the other stages, I want to give you like an archetype, or I think that's very useful if you haven't heard of this model before, because then you can rather quickly get a rough idea of what this is about. So in stage beige, you can imagine a newborn baby or an animal. So this is a very crude, very basic, and yet essential stage of development where basically you don't even understand that there's other beings and they have other needs or whatever. For you, the important thing is that, oh, I need to survive. Like this is I don't know what I am or what's happening here, but I need to survive. Like I need food, I need shelter. So if you imagine that baby, it doesn't really understand that there's a mother taking care of him, or, I mean, we're talking about newborns, right? So there's no such understanding, but it's still somehow, oh, I need something, right? And I need to fulfill these needs that I have. So it's a very, very crude level, and it's actually, I would say, not even worth spending that much time on it, because hopefully most people will not be on that stage. By the way, also on the very left column, you can always see roughly how many people are in that stage compared to the rest. And also these numbers don't add up to exactly 100%, because this is not an exact number, okay? So the next stage is stage purple. This is, you can imagine a shaman or someone from a tribe. The idea here is that you understand, oh, okay, I'm part of a group. And together we have this identity. From beige to purple, and also every other stage, it is so that you're always oscillating between I am more kind of individual versus I am more part of a group. So on stage purple, your identity is part of a group. Because also identity is a thing, like also spiritually, like it's really important that you, as clearly as you can, see where you have any identifications. So with purple, you're kind of the tribe, right? So instead of like not understanding that there's even other entities out there, you understand now, okay, there's other entities out there, but still when it comes to fulfilling needs, you see yourself as this tribe, and that's your identity. So you cannot even leave that tribe. That would be not really not imaginable for you. It's really about superstition and kind of this magical thinking where still many things about how the world works is not really clear yet, and it's about pleasing the ancestors and pleasing ghosts and so on. So it's in that matter still a primitive stage, but I think what comes in here first is this understanding of being part of a group. But when you evolve from that, we come to stage red. And this is a really important stage, I would say, to understand. Because now we're oscillating back from being part of a group or identified with that group, identification, to, I want more power, actually. You know, if I just work and get what I want, I can be more powerful. So I can dominate and rule over other people. And this is I would say this is the most egotistical stage of all that we have, because this stage really doesn't give a damn about other people. It's about control and power. It's not really taking into consideration that much that, you know, there are other people and they have different needs and so on. That's not really a perspective that this level has. So that's, I mean, definitely the positive side here is that someone understands, okay, so if I split up from that group, I can, you know, improve my life somehow, right? So I can grow beyond what the tribe has to offer to me. That is definitely a big developmental stage. But then this stage lacks very much the empathy for other people, because it's really just about me. So that's definitely the shadow side of this level red. And you can imagine a warlord or something like that. It just takes what he wants. And yeah, because people understand at some point that, well, if everybody behaves like this, definitely we won't have a safe and secure environment that we want to live in. So some people had the smart idea of, hey, you know, let's get together into a group and let's form rules and laws that everyone has to obey to. Basically, an archetype, even on the societal level that you have on stage blue, is the church, or religions in general, let's say. Or even something like bureaucracy can be put into stage blue. Because again, here we are on the identification as part of the group. And it's really important here, really important, that you're either following the rules set by this community, whatever that is. Can be anything, but it's about a community that sets rules, regulations, laws, and things that you just have to follow, right? As religion does, you know, and people kind of start understanding it may not be the best thing, just blindly following rules. But that's what they want from you. And otherwise, you're not part of the group anymore. And if you just imagine the medieval ages, then not being part of the village, that was already kind of like damnation. So you couldn't have that. So there was a big, how do you say, pressure on you staying in that group and being part of the group. So it was really hard to get away from this, especially if I think about medieval times. I can understand that. I assume most people will not have evolved past this stage, because it was like, from the survival level thinking, it was just not a smart thing to do and may have led to, you know, banning that person from the village or whatever. And depending on how much, you know, might the church had in that village or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, this stage, a lot about rules, and it's kind of like giving a lot of structure, which is also then like the disadvantage. I mean, on the one hand, you know, you see, coming from red, you have the advantage of structure and you have the advantage of rules, and also following, you know, kind of a higher purpose. So there's some authority that tells you that there's this higher purpose or the higher entity that you can, you know, devote your life to. And it mustn't even be a god or something, but there is someone who gives you the rules, and you're a nice person if you just follow these rules. Blindly, you can say, right? You have to. It's not like they're asking you, it's really like they're forcing you to follow the rules. So, yeah, I think that's the big disadvantage of stage blue, is kind of the rigidity, and you blindly have to accept what they're offering to you, right? And then again, in a similar matter, we oscillate to the next stage, which is orange, which is very big today. It's, you know, about technology and science and using the intellect and logic. So we're coming from the group identification again to the identification as I'm an individual and I can achieve something by myself, right? So it's a lot of the thinking here is about success and achievement and progress, also technology, and going beyond this rigid thinking and these rigid rules or belief systems that, for example, church may have set up. And yeah, of course, we have this typical person here that we see a lot these days, especially in the West, that always tries to improve things, right? So it's a lot about, you know, technology is a means of improving the life that's already there. So a person on this level may have the tendency to improve things in general by technology and by the intellect, and especially really not following old dogmas or like boxes that have been put over people, but saying, well, I can improve on this, right? So it's yeah, maybe you can say, yeah, it's a more progressive approach, and let's say transcending rules and wrong belief systems that have been put onto people. But still, that's not I mean, that's not the end of the road that we have here. The next stage is green. We're coming again to a stage where you're identified with part of a group. And like a usual archetype that I like to say here is, you know, the hippie also, right? So someone is really about love and harmony and focus on the group and focus on, you know, we have this one planet and let's all work together, right? And especially for people in this stage is where I gave the disclaimer to, because people here have this strong tendency to have harmony over everything else. It's like harmony and being this united group and you know, everybody loves everybody else is a very high value. It's also like it's like a hidden dogma even, right? So but until the next stage, which I explain in a minute, it's not really seen as that. Still until green, like every stage until here, will always think that my truth, the way I see it, is the one and only truth. Usually, right? Usually. So even still here, green doesn't even see that it's still caught up in their own dogma and in their own truth. I mean, they realize everybody has their own truth, but then the problem kind of arises with the idea that every truth is equally good or equally big, and that is just not true. There's truths that are just bigger than others, and the bigger ones may include the smaller ones, or they could be, or if you don't want to use bigger, you could say more specific, right? Or it could be context dependent. And then green is not yet at that level where they kind of get this really. And the way I see the main problem here is this harmony thing, and that, like, I don't know why. Like for me, it was like even recently I tried to understand from a few people, but I couldn't really get into that thinking where, you know, just because someone is developed in, let's say, a skill or in what I'm describing here with this model, for them it's always as if I was saying I'm better than you, you know, I'm over you, and they would think it's arrogant or something. And I think it lacks a bit the clear language, or somehow it may come from past experiences. I'm not really sure where that comes from. For me, it's a small mystery still, especially when I try to really explain this to them, and I can see they don't understand it. Maybe if you're at that stage, I would suggest that this is a very important point. Yeah, anyway, so this stage is a lot about harmony and community and understanding that, okay, we have this one planet, so let's work together, right? It's understanding also that, you know, in stage orange, progress and success maybe even more important than preserving the planet, right? And on green, you can have these archetype also of activists that want to save the planet, because they understand, well, you can't just make infinite amounts of money by deforesting the rainforest. It just doesn't work. We just have this one planet, so, you know, we have to be this group of people that agree that, hey, let's save the planet, you know, and that there are limits to let's say success, or, you know, work is not everything. That's not the main point of your life. And orange may still be caught up in that loop. So the next stage is also from the original model. It's not just the next stage, but it's even called a second tier, or the integral tier. So there's actually kind of a gap in what I try to explain in green. So this stage yellow, it's like a systems architect. Starting from this stage, you really try to understand. This is a very intellectual stage. Here we start to see that, oh, wait. Everyone has his own truth, right? But then they have different sizes, let's say, or different depths. And also starting from stage yellow, people understand, okay, there's these, I mean, we're living in a kind of duality, right? So there's sometimes, if you look into it, there's even paradox that you cannot solve somehow. But stage yellow develops a big capacity to handle a lot of complexity and also to handle paradox. And also to see systems. You know, they see systems and how they interact. And they understand that, oh, it's really, you know, kind of context dependent, which methods I use, which kind of thinking I even use. So depending on what goal you want to achieve, it's not that, oh, this is the one way and this is always the best. No. So the context sensitivity here and the understanding of that, and also getting an understanding, really like the mental understanding, is a really mentally active stage. How these systems work together, and maybe, you know, what's the best way of acting if you want to achieve something, but trying to see the whole picture. So when you reach stage yellow, it is then that you it's like having an overview over all these stages, and then you can begin to grasp these kind of different truths. And yellow does a better job at stage green, because green doesn't want to admit that, you know, it's just like, they don't like hierarchy, and they don't like that someone maybe, you know, better or further than someone else. Just this mere thought of this is horrible for them. It's something they cannot accept. And, you know, yellow is a bit more maybe rational, let's say, about it. But yeah, this stage has to, you know, fights a bit with over intellectualization, and it's a lot of thinking on this stage. You may be at a point where you're looking for clarity. There may be tension, recurring patterns, or some kind of misalignment feeling, and it's not clear where that comes from. My work is to make visible these processes and bring things into motion that are stuck. My work is precise and reflective. That means together we're taking an honest look at the root causes of your challenges, always without any dogma or judgment. Self-reflection is my main tool, but depending on the situation, I also work with inner parts, constellation work, and energy-based approaches. If this resonates with you, feel free to reach out for a short introductory conversation, and we have a look together whether this work makes sense for you or not. You can find more information on my website below. Thank you. The next stage is turquoise. This is the last stage from the original model. And turquoise, this is about integration. And there's not many people yet on that kind of level of development. So this one is about integration. Like, you can say that yellow understands intellectually, and turquoise is the stage that integrates that. I guess for both, in a sense, there can be the tendency of not really acting. So maybe because, like, imagine that on stage yellow, you're consuming a lot of information, like you're eating it. Then on stage turquoise, you're digesting it. So, and it's a kind of holistic level again. It sees yourself as like, it can see the whole world as like this one organism where everything is connected, but not so much, you know, like the intellect that likes to cut things into pieces that it can then analyze. But for turquoise, it's a more organic thing. So someone on that stage sees himself as like a cell in a big organism, right? And also, you can have the idea here that, oh, there's a bigger something behind all this. So it's not just on the rational level, because with this stage, very interestingly, you start to develop, you know, more subtle sensations. You can, for example, some energy healers develop their skills, and they see this comes from somewhere, and there's like a higher like there's this higher intelligence or entity or whatever you want to call it, higher system, even whatever you want to call it, and then we are also part of the system. So this stage has a lot to do with the connection to the higher system. Like when you develop your intuition really consciously, I think this mostly happens on this stage, because you can really understand that there is something higher where all this comes from. But the let's say, if you want to call it, disadvantage of this stage is that because it's still digesting and it's not intellectualizing anymore so much, it's still not very active. It's still not acting out a lot because like, I'm talking from my experience now. Like, what can I even do that is like, why should I do anything from my ego? Why should I come up with goals, right? when there's, you know, an entity that drives everything, right? So it's something that I kind of struggled a lot with. Is this, well, I mean, okay, you know, my solution to all of this is that what I'm doing here right now with this video, talking to you, especially about this topic, is my answer to the question, like, where, like, how do you go forward? Like, where do you develop the world? How do you do that? And if I came to the conclusion, okay, I'm acting from my highest potential, but what is God doing? Like, what's life and what's the universe doing? And it's doing this. Like, everyone on his level, I think, in a sense, is developing. And the earlier you understand that there is some, you know, this kind of development taking place, you can then more consciously and more actively take part of it. Or let's say, you can resist less, which is a very important aspect. Yeah, so I would say from stage yellow and turquoise, big problem is the acting on it, because it's still a lot about understanding and digesting, as I said. So turquoise may be wise, but still it lacks the acting out. So to make the border between yellow and turquoise a bit more clear. Yellow is like, okay, you know, I understand the map. Whereas turquoise is more like, I'm merging with the landscape. Turquoise doesn't have this dual thing anymore. So it's like kind of the borders between what is me and what is the outside, that kind of merges. So turquoise has a tendency to lose, in a sense, itself, or the boundaries, you know, it merges and it understands. So I'm not looking at a field where something is happening. I am the field where stuff is happening. And that's a really big thing. It's a really big difference. Also on turquoise, we go more, like, this is a big shift starting here, I guess, or maybe at coral, but I think it starts here. There's a big shift from doing to being. I think all the other stages before turquoise, they are still doing, like there's agendas and everything. And turquoise doesn't really have that much of an agenda, because it feels like it's just a part of a living organism. And that kind of goes together with, like, I don't really have my own will. Like, who am I, you know? Because the ego it became so little that there's hardly any drive to do anything by yourself, right? Then there is another stage that was not part of the original model, but somehow people in the community agreed, and they called the next stage coral. This, of course, is a stage where not many people are really centered at. And, you know, again, you're not always just on one level. You may be in a transition phase. You may have certain aspects that are still, you know, back from orange or whatever. But this is really a stage where I can tell you there's not like from the percentage, there's not a lot of people on that level. So I'm not fully centered there, for sure not, but for sure I made, you know, my steps into it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe 20-25% into that stage. So I cannot, you know, completely grasp it yet, maybe, but I think I get the idea. I can see where this should be going, and I can see where I am, and I see, yeah, okay, I get it. Because this stage now is really about acting, like when it, like the archetype here is a sage, right? But that doesn't mean this enlightened guru sitting in the cave and doing nothing. That's not what it means. The embodied here means that it's not just, you know, I think you say airy fairy or something, like on a mental, you know, cloudy thing, but no, he's someone on this stage is connected with the truth, is connected with intuition, and it's really like completely part of his system. And he's not really acting from an ego perspective anymore. I mean, even with turquoise, you can say that there is not much ego left. But someone on this level, they create, like they have this understanding, and they are not caught in their intellect anymore, which, for example, is a big problem with me. So the people on this level, they act out what they understand, and let's say there's not so much resistance anymore in terms of should I do this or that, because they're following the intuition and let's say the energy that comes from the higher systems. I think it's also here, if not already starting in turquoise, I'm not really sure where the border is, that people will talk a lot about non-duality, and that, you know, they may have even transcended duality. I'm not really sure when someone says that, what they actually mean by it. But I've heard from many people, especially online, that they're talking like this, and I get the impression that, yeah, they may be there. It may not be very many people, for sure not. You will not, and and also, like, let's say you're you're green, right? It may be very difficult, to see that someone is like 1 or 2 levels advanced, especially if you haven't reached yellow. Like whatever is below yellow, then you may have difficulty seeing that someone's perspective and development is just further advanced, because you will still be in this ego battle of I have the truth and you do it differently, so you can't be right. Like it's this kind of fight, and it doesn't really take place anymore in the higher stages. In the higher stages, you just see where that person is, and you can, for example, see they cannot hold, you know, like different perspectives at the same time, understanding that none of them may be true, or, you know, it's all just approximations. And that also understanding, like at the higher stages, that I mean, language itself is kind of, let's say, crippled, you know, it's a crude abstraction from reality. I mean, of course I'm transmitting some kind of information here, but yeah, okay, we're getting into a different field. Yeah, so I want to make a short summary on this model. Every human being goes through a certain kind of development, and this model, I think, is a very good one to explain what's happening, what are the issues that each level has, and how do they solve it. And it's also good to see what is the object that they can see, or the relation, like how big can they think, like how much complexity can they hold in their system. I think that's a very good indicator for seeing where someone is. And also you will have less ego, less identification with anything on the higher levels, and you will have less stress and less fights and arguments with other people, because you will also see that we're all one, and that it just doesn't make sense to fight with your ego against other egos. It's just useless. Okay, so this model, I think, is a wonderful tool, and there's really, really a lot to it. You cannot imagine how good it is, actually, because this is just, you know, like an overview, an introduction to it. And I hope it was really useful for you, especially if you're working with other people, especially if you're trying to, get into their perspective. And yeah, maybe you're a coach or a healer or something like this, and you want to help people reach the next stage, right? I think it's really good for that. Yeah, and of course, as always, please, if you have questions or you have some kind of comment or whatever it is, or critique, please let me know in the comments, because I'm really a fan of this model, and I want to give it to you. And if you have anything that's unclear or something that I could improve, then please let me know. Definitely interested in that. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful for you, and hope to see you in the next one.